Hello there, and today I am back with Angela Durant, and we are now talking about auditions and what you can learn from an audition and how that can help you with uh, job interviews. So, Angela, before we get stuck in, once again, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I can. My background is as a singer, performer, and then 11 years ago, I opened a vocal coaching studio. Um, I have been on both sides of the audition chair, as it were, with totally failing at auditions and hating the whole process and just horrible experience. Right the way through to when I actually sat on an audition panel and had to listen to 80 singers in 3 hours, many of them singing Beyonce's Halo at the time because it happened to be in the charts. So I've been on both sides of the scale, and it wasn't until I was on the other side of the scale that I could, for the first time, see why I had failed in the audition process when I had failed. It was a huge eye opener for me. So I now work with, I still work with singers, but mostly work with business people and senior leaders and people around their speaking, their communication, their presence, and how the whole kind of communication piece works for people.
Great, great. So you're the perfect person to talk to.
I can give you some hell stories as well.
I mean, there are a lot of parallels between job interviews and auditions, and recently somebody, when I was talking to them about the hub, suggested that it would be great to talk to an actor or a singer who's been through lots of auditions and has honed that ability to basically look back at an audition, decide what went well, decide what didn't go well, um, and then put it behind them, and don't let it haunt them on the next one. So, I mean, in today's economic climate, it's possible that people are doing a lot of job interviews,
Mm.
and you know, if you're having job interviews and you're not getting a job, the feeling of disappointment can mount up, can't it? So being able to actually think about what went well, think about what didn't, and then put that behind you and turn to the next job interview fresh, I think it's a really good skill to have. So tell us how to cultivate it, Angela.
Oh gosh, there's too many in my background of horror stories to tell you. My first horrendous audition started at the age of 9 years old, where a London agent told my parents, kind of in no uncertain terms, I wasn't ready, and just that it was just horrendous. so, so I've got loads of stories. But the first thing that was really helpful to me when I was going through this audition process years ago, and it's you set a load up. It's no different in the music world. There's an audition season, as it were, and you'll kind of book a whole load of these auditions up, and you'll go with your kind of stuff, and you'll go and put yourself in front of people. Um, and the first thing that somebody said to me that was innately helpful in dealing with it was, Angela, first of all, learn the difference between fact and opinion. Fact is something I can actually go and do something about. Opinion is nothing that I can do anything about. If somebody ever says to you, we just don't think you'll fit with our team, that's unless they're very open and to say it's a skill based issue. It's an opinion, and it's got it's got everything to do with them, and you can't do anything about that. That's an opinion. If it's that we can't bring you into this team because there's certain core skills that you don't have, and we don't have the time to train you, and we've got 100 people in our application pool with them, that's fact. There's something you can actually go and do something about, but
Yeah.
opinion you can't. So that was first of all incredibly helpful, because once you've had a number of disappointments in any field, the natural thing that we tend to do is we tend to turn the blame back to ourselves, and then we start to be prey to insecure thinking, and that insecure thinking takes us off our A game and not on. So one of the little ways that I helped to move forward is I really did, certainly as musicians, and I think it's important sometimes if somebody is in the job circuits, the job search, get a mentor while you're in that search. Get somebody that you can actually have some feedback from and some collaboration from. some perspective, because one of the things that I think is true from maybe job seekers to singers is that singers can't have any real perspective on themselves at all. You can't tell what you've done in the moment in that makes any difference. And you very rarely, at least in job interviews, sometimes you get some feedback. In a lot of auditions you don't get any, unless you get through to the next round or something. So I had to find a system at the time to find the difference between fact and opinion and what was and wasn't working for me. So at the time, I didn't always have great mentors. They would be, oh, just do it again, you'll be fine. That's not actually helpful. You don't need that level of cheerleading. You need some real strategic help as to somebody to objectively look at you. So I think if you can get some level of career coaching and mentoring through this period, particularly if you're not getting the kind of results you want, that will help you with some perspective, and it will keep you out of your own insecurity. The second thing is I had a post kind of like audition process for myself, and I would often sort of create a pre one, a day one, as it were, in the performance, and a post one. The pre one was the kind of work that I'd done in the preparation beforehand. On the day, it was kind of, once I kind of evaluated the day, I wanted to check how close to my performance objectives I'd actually got, regardless of what I got in the result. Was I edging forwards to be able to sell the song in the right way? Was I better at handling my nerves this time round? Did I handle the off-the-cuff questions afterwards better than I did the time before? So it's almost like bringing yourself into a space where you can make incremental process, and you can actually have a level of self-awareness past the initial emotional yes or no, high or low of it, as it were. That had enabled me, once I could make that little bit of self-awareness, whether I learnt to do it myself or initially got somebody else to help me create that self-awareness, those little like, did you know, oh, it was all terrible, it's all terrible, and then somebody goes, well, actually, were you less nervous than the last time? Well, actually, yes, I was. Did you handle the off-the-cuff questions better? Well, actually, yes, I did, and I still remembered at the end to ask that. In which case, regardless of whether you get it or not, you've made progress, and that's the thing that you have to celebrate, because you're edging towards becoming better at this thing, not just zero to hero. Nobody often does A to Z in these things, you know. Let's go B, C, D, and bring ourselves into a place where we can handle these interviews and auditions, which are just not, nobody feels comfortable in them. No, not even the top performers that I know enjoy auditions. Nobody really enjoys it. It's a necessary thing that they have to do to you know, to go and do you know, an actor's reading or a script reading or do that. There's no way round it to be cast, so they have to get used to it or find their own processes for handling it. So I think being able to be objective about yourself without disparaging, I always say be kind to yourself, but not the kind that leads to excuses, because then you can't do anything about it. Then afterwards you can go, okay, you know, if there is feedback, you know, you can then look at that and go, is that an opinion feedback? Is that not? You know, I would get things like, I just didn't like the way you sang those vowels. I'm like going, well, what do I do with that? Yeah. You know, like, or if somebody says, actually, you weren't secure in your technique in that area of your voice. Well, that's something that I can go away and go, well, actually, that's coming up 3 and 4 times in these interviews. So you kind of look at, a bit like a doctor looks at the trend of a patterns of somebody's illness, as it were, in order to know where to put the next level of, you know, sort of prescriptive diagnosis and moving forward. You look and go, is there something that's coming up time and time again in these interviews for me? Is there something? Is it the way that I speak? Is it the way that I tell the stories? Is it the you know, is it the skill? Is it a particular skill set that I need? Am I actually playing small? Are they saying that I'm overqualified? Do I need to be actually getting some coaching to try and find the level that I need to be at? So you can kind of see it from a post, a present, and it's sort of like a pre, a present, and a post perspective. And if you have, as I'll reiterate it, if you haven't got to the level of being able to find your own preparatory process for doing that for yourself, which sometimes takes a while, took me a good few years, then get somebody in your corner that can help you walk through that process and have the level of objectivity and perspective to keep you out of the weeds and moving forward. That's quite a mouthful, but that's what I did to overcome it. And just to say, when I sat on the panel of being the interviewer at the time of a load of singers, I sat back and I thought, oh my goodness me, here were some of the common mistakes that I saw all of the time. If I try and translate it from singing to some job related version of it were, but people would they weren't going for the right song, they weren't going for the right role.
Yeah.
They didn't actually know their own skills and talents well enough to actually pick the right job. It was kind of like, just make me famous, or just like me, or give me permission to like myself, as it were. You know, they didn't know themselves. They didn't know themselves. They then hadn't necessarily put the required practice into their own technical ability to be able to put that in out, or to be able to give that an understanding of that under pressure. So they didn't have the required skill set for the things that they were doing in that moment. They were kind of blagging it, or they'd been singing in the bedroom or something, you know, and it worked well in the hairbrush, but not under pressure somewhere else. And they weren't able to bring it when it mattered in that respect. And then finally is that, you know, was saying and singing the same thing that everybody else was saying and singing at that time.
Yeah, that's a common one, isn't it?
Right. So
yeah.
they just, yeah, they weren't thinking about that in just all of that stuff in terms of how they could bring a freshness, even if there was a set song to sing, you know, or a set type of questions. How could they answer them different? What are the stuck in trade answers that everybody's coming out with? And you know, if you can go speak to a recruiter, go speak to somebody and say, what are you hearing that everybody else is saying? And think about how you could be different, how you could actually say it in a fresh way that would be real and authentic to you. And those are the three things that I saw commonly, time and time again, which I think can still be relevant to a job seeker.
Yeah. But I suppose one of the most unhelpful feedback sort of lines you get are, wow, actually another candidate came along who was better for the position. And I suppose in auditions, because in auditions you often see the people that you are auditioning against, so that must be even worse. But any tips on dealing with that? Because it's hard to glean any real feedback from something like that, isn't it?
I think it totally is. So I always used to ask to see if they could explain what was the difference that made the difference. Like, just say, are you at liberty to explain to me a little bit further why you chose that candidate over me? You know, sometimes we want to go and sit in a hole rather than ask the question. Yeah. So because I'm looking for something factual. So for instance, I just had things like, well, they had more experience than you. And when I was very young in the game, I got scared of asking the next question was, okay, in terms of what? Could you just give me one specific? It would be just so helpful for me to go away. Now, if they are going to be helpful, they may give you that information, okay, and be helpful. If they're not going to be helpful, then I would kind of say, wipe the dust off your feet and then go and do another one. Because after you've done 2 or 3, you're going to see if that's the same thing coming up or if it's not. Sometimes you just don't just take the one thing as kind of biblical truth on the subject. But you know, if you can ask a question and ask, I will say specifically, can you give me an example of what you were looking for that I didn't present on the day?
Yeah.
Where was the gap for you in what I presented? And that's kind of almost, imagine you and not you asking that question. Imagine you are the agent of said person, as it were, or you put yourself in almost like you're the recruiter. What did my candidate not have that you were looking for in that day?
Yeah.
And if you can kind of step outside of yourself as if you were asking on behalf of somebody else, it can take what I call the emotional heat out of the questioning. And if there's something that you can then really look at and work on, it's always a little bit what I call, you know, we all have to kind of deal with that part of our ego and our defensiveness that goes, oh God, I wasn't enough. and separate the, actually, as a human being, you are equal to every other human being, even if one is paid $1 billion and somebody is paid peanuts. You are, in essence, as a human being, equal on this planet. You have the same bodily functions, the same, physicality most of the time. We've got hearts and lungs mostly, unless there's a problem there. We are the same in essence as human beings. So to hold your essence as true and important is really, really vital, because if you start saying to yourself, I'm not enough, you've actually you've put a cross through your own personhood, and that is not for sale, and it is not bought or hired or sold at any price. On the back of that, you can say, okay, in this world, value or commodity or time or my skills are sold for money at this level, or a career or something that I'm wanting to do at this level. I've got to then be able to prove the value of those skills to that organization, that company, that situation, and separate off the who from the do in doing that. Because once you've had a few disappointments, we start to blend the who and the do together, and that's where the mistakes in psychology happen. It's all innocent. Not one of us can know any more than we know at the moment. But if you can get some factual information, and you can take the emotional heat out of blaming yourself, then you can actually start to take necessary steps to move yourself into a forward-facing position.
Yeah. And I liked what you said about, remember, feedback is not the biblical truth. It might be that, you reminded them of their cousin that they had an argument with years ago and haven't spoken to for 10 years.
Oh, totally. You've got no idea whether you show up and you sound like you're somebody's ex-wife, or, they've just literally put the phone. Here's the deal, is you've got no idea. Somebody might have just literally had an argument with their secretary. They've just been ticked off by their boss, and they've got to come and do the interview with you. You've got no idea what's actually going on in the world of the person in front of you. Do not blame yourself. Work on factual stuff. Do not blame yourself in that moment, but be kind, as it were, to yourself, and recognize that we're all innocently operating under whatever reality we're thinking in that moment. And ultimately, it's not about you. Your job, though, is to, if you want that job, or you particularly want to be in that company, one might feed back and say, you've got no skills for this company in this role at all, and the next one you go to says, we're really happy to train you in those skills that you haven't got, come on board. You've just got no way of knowing. So it's like, separate the who from the do. Realize that you cannot be impressive. You might as well just really be good and excellent at communicating what you can do. And staying as grounded and as present in the moment as you can. Because if you're bringing past auditions, as it were, past things into your insecurity in the moment, you're going to pick that up. If somebody's got a low sense of self-worth, that's a non-verbal communication that's kind of just goes across the airwaves, as it were, and that makes an interviewer nervous as to whether you are going to be the right person.
Yeah, and I know what's worked for me with things like that, with interviews, is basically, I journal quite a bit. It's just to sort of diarise them, to journal them through, tell the story, and then that's it. I don't look at it again. It's almost as though I've got it out.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to, sometimes if it was a real disappointment, I'd go and do something kind for yourself afterwards. Do you know what I mean? Like, it could be that you go and just sit down and have a latte, or you go and buy yourself a favourite pen or a new journal, or just something. That's why I said, be kind to yourself. It's really important that in any disappointment that you give yourself a level of compassion. You're doing the best that you can with what you've got at the moment. And tomorrow you might, kind of just have some more understanding or knowledge, or something might click for you in a different way. So do something kind for yourself, but then don't fall into blame, shame, or excuses, because that does not lead you into it knocks you out of the present moment, and it takes you out of your power and your real essence to actually to make a success of maybe your next interview.
Yeah. And I like what you said about, think about like an agent. So even, that could be like an ongoing thing, isn't there? The agent looks at not just asking for feedback, but looking at what would my agent say about my performance, what would they say to do next.
Yeah, you've got to kind of almost try and do it almost like that 360 on yourself, where you almost like play all of the, if Shakespeare was right and all the world is a stage and we are merely players, a part of, play all the parts, you
Yeah,
know, play all the parts in your own mind. It's a bit like, I think, in Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, his book, he was kind of like, have this sort of virtual mastermind of people that you would love around your board table and what they would say to you. Well, you can almost act out those parts yourself, or you could imagine your greatest critics and cheerleaders imaginary around your virtual sort of imaginary board table, and they're all in your favor, but they're all sort of helping you to see out of that perspective of insecurity,
yeah.
and into what's going to help you to smash it next time, really.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Angela.
Pleasure.
As always, Angela's details will be below, so you can contact her there. Great, thank you.